Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to enter into a colloquy with senators from Minnesota and Connecticut.
Without objection.
Mr. President, in the months since world powers reached an agreement to block Iran's pathway to building a nuclear weapon, Iran's behavior has given the international community reasons for both some optimism and continuing serious concern. The positive news has been that Iran has taken some real steps to restrain its nuclear program. It's disabled 2 of its short-term pathways to producing weapons-grade material by shipping nearly its entire stockpile of enriched uranium out of the country and by filling its plutonium reactor with concrete. Iran has reduced its number of functioning uranium enrichment centrifuges by 2/3, and the country has provided international inspectors 24/7 access to continuously monitor all of Iran's declared nuclear facilities. These are positive developments. Yet at the same time, Iran continues to engage in deeply concerning activities, such as support for terrorism and efforts to foment instability in the Middle East, and to conduct illegal ballistic missile tests, and to continue to violate its citizens' most basic human rights. Today, my colleagues and I come to the floor to draw attention to some of the more grave, more concerning developments of recent weeks. And I'm honored to have the company of my friend, the senior senator from Connecticut, Senator Blumenthal, who will join me in addressing why Russia's refusal to condemn Iran's bad behavior, and in fact, in some ways, encourage it, poses huge security risks for our allies in the Middle East. I'd now like to yield, if I could, to my colleague from Connecticut.
Mr. President.
The senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to express my gratitude to my friend from Delaware, who is truly expert on this issue as a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. He has been a leader in this area, and I'm delighted and honored to join him on the floor today to discuss the ever-evolving and concerning cooperation between Russia and Iran, particularly in recent months. And he has very eloquently and persuasively described a number of the concerns that we share, and I want to associate myself with what he has said here this afternoon. As we all know, Iran has conducted multiple ballistic missile tests in the last several months. That is beyond question, and I have continuously condemned both Iran's ongoing ballistic missile program and Iran's failure to uphold its international obligations under the UN Security Council resolutions by calling for sanctions enforcement at the Armed Services Committee hearings and in letters to the administration and in public statements. We have been steadfast in this effort. While the administration has heeded my calls by enforcing sanctions against 11 entities and individuals supporting Iran's missile program, clearly more must be done. The United States and the international community must vigilantly enforce sanctions on Iran's ballistic missile development, as well as its state sponsorship of terrorism and human rights violations, which continue day in and day out. And these steps must be taken to hold this regime accountable and prevent Tehran from believing it can violate international law with impunity. Nothing less is at stake here than that principle. And yet Russia has refused to punish Iran. As a world power and permanent member of the UN Security Council, Russia can and must be doing more to counter Iran's destructive deeds, including ensuring that Iran abides by UN Security Council 2231. This resolution calls on Iran not to undertake any activity related to ballistic missiles designed to be capable of delivering nuclear weapons, including launches using ballistic missile technology. That is a quote. And that mandate applies for up to 8 years from the JCPOA's adoption day. October 18, 2005. In March, one of Iran's defiant tests notoriously involved a missile that had a disturbing and alarming message scrawled on the side, quote, "Israel must be wiped off the face of the earth," end quote. This explicit message, by the way, written not only in Persian, but in Hebrew, was designed to directly threaten Israel, and that is hardly speculation. It should not be tolerated by any nation. Even worse than Russia's refusal to condemn Iran's ballistic missile tests is that Russia has essentially rewarded Iran for its bad behavior by continuing, even increasing, its cooperation with Iran through military deals. In February, Iran's defense minister visited Moscow to discuss purchasing an array of weapons and any sale of major combat systems to Iran in the next 5 years would require approval by the UN Security Council under Resolution 2231. But the United States has made it clear that such a sale will not be supported and therefore will not be approved by the Security Council. Media reports in recent weeks have highlighted Russia's shipment of parts of an S-300 air defense system to Iran. In addition, Russia and Iran are supposedly in talks over Sukhoi fighter jets. If such sales are finalized and the systems are delivered, Russia would be directly defying UN Resolution 2231. Supplying weapons to Iran is particularly dangerous and potentially damaging because it is not done in a vacuum. Russia's growing partnership has far-reaching ramifications because Hezbollah, Iran's terrorist proxy in Lebanon, also benefits, at least indirectly, from Russian arms and military operational experience in Syria. The flow of support from Russia to Iran to Hezbollah feeds into yet another threat that deeply concerns me and our greatest ally in the Middle East, and one of our greatest in the world, Israel. Coupled with continued chaos in the region, the Russian-Iranian cooperation strengthening Hezbollah only adds to the urgency and importance of ensuring that Israel remain secure, stable, and independent. Last November, Senator Bennett and I co-led a letter to the President concerning the need to renew the Memorandum of Understanding on United States military assistance, the MOU as it's known, with Israel to help that nation prepare for, respond to, and defend against threats in an uncertain regional environment, and to ensure its qualitative military edge. Nothing original or novel about that policy or principle. The current MOU provides $30 billion in assistance to Israel through fiscal year 2018. As threats in the region continue to evolve, including Iran's malign influence, reinforced and enabled by Russia, the administration must engage at the highest levels to continue to develop a shared understanding of threats confronting Israel by strengthening the MOU that serves as the foundation of our bilateral security efforts. Those efforts support not only Israel, they are in the national interest of the United States of America. Indeed, they are essential to our national interest in the region and in the world. While negotiations remain ongoing between the U.S. and Israel regarding historic renewal of the MOU, I want to express that I continue to support making the MOU a truly transformational investment to deepen the U.S.-Israel strategic partnership. It is based on a shared understanding of the environment that confronts Israel and the United States together. And Russia is only exacerbating the threats in the region to our partnership, the United States and Israel, as well as to each of our nations. The Russian-Iranian cooperation legitimizes and strengthens Tehran's adventurism, as well as the Assad regime in Syria, and threatens international security. Moscow's affair with Tehran and beyond has brought Russian military might to a network of terrorism that we must continue to monitor closely and work to combat for the safety and security of the United States. It is our security and it is Israel's security that are at stake together, and the entire international community's security. I want to thank my colleague from Delaware again for giving me this time and his patience in hearing me out. I look forward to working with him and others of our colleagues who are concerned about the Russian-Iranian cooperation. They are certainly deeply concerning. And I want to thank him again for his leadership and vision on this topic. Thank you.
Mr. President, I thank my colleague from Connecticut who has been determined and engaged and thoughtful and vigilant for his wise words today and for his persistence of effort in making sure that our colleagues on both sides of the aisle are aware of alarming developments in the region and continue to do everything we can in a responsible and bipartisan way to support Israel's security through the MOU, which he's referenced, and where he led a letter about the importance of a prompt and supportive renegotiation of that MOU, and by calling attention to Russia's destabilizing actions. As Senator Blumenthal just referenced, recent media reports convey that Iran is reporting Russia has already delivered parts of this S-300 weapons system, a defense system they claim, but a weapons system that would significantly change the regional balance of power. And I'd just like to again thank my colleague from Connecticut for being shoulder to shoulder with me here on the floor today and in the months and years behind us and the months and years ahead of us, because this will be a long-standing challenge to keep the members of this body and folks here in Washington focused on the very real threat to America's security and Israel's security that's presented by Iran and its actions. As Senator Blumenthal mentioned, when it comes to countering Iranian aggression in the Middle East, a number of Russia's recent actions do threaten to do more harm than good. Last summer, when the United States came together with the United Kingdom, France, Germany, China, and Russia to reach an agreement with Iran to block their pathway to build a nuclear weapon, the international community was clear that the success of this deal relied on every signatory keeping its word and doing its part to prevent Iran from violating the deal. The responsibility to enforce the terms of the JCPOA goes hand in hand with an understanding that world powers must also push back on Iran's bad behavior outside the four corners of this agreement. Specifically, its support for terrorism, its continued illegal ballistic missile tests, and its human rights violations. So despite its participation in the negotiations that led to the agreement, Russia reportedly plans to sell missile systems to the still dangerous Iranian regime, as well as, referenced by Senator Blumenthal, advanced fighter jets. Russia also continues to block the UN Security Council from taking action, necessary and responsible action, after Iran's recent illegal ballistic missile tests, which contravene its commitments under Security Council Resolution 2231. Despite the divisions that have brought Congress to a standstill in recent years, I'm confident that we all agree on one thing, that Iran must not be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. And I continue to believe the JCPOA represents the least bad option for blocking Iran's pathway to a nuclear bomb. But in recent months, as I've said, Russia has repeatedly undermined the spirit of that agreement, using the JCPOA as an excuse to proceed with dangerous and provocative sales of allegedly defensive equipment to Iran. According to news reports, as I said, Russia has begun delivering parts of the S-300 surface-to-air missile system to Iran. Although it remains unclear how much of that system has already been delivered, 5 S-300 systems Russia has promised to Iran would contain 40 launchers, which could shoot down missiles or aircraft as far as 90 miles away, and one version of the S-300 currently in use by the Russian military can travel nearly 250 miles at 5 times the speed of sound. In a worst-case scenario, if Iran backs out of the nuclear deal, this S-300 system would substantially limit the international community's options to act to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. That's not all, though. Recent news reports indicate Russia and Iran are actively negotiating an agreement to allow Iran to purchase an unknown number of Sukhoi Su-30 fighter jets, similar to the one pictured here, some of the most advanced fighter jets available in the world. Although it is unclear what specific version of this aircraft Iran is seeking to obtain, these advanced weapons would significantly enhance the capabilities of Iran's Air Force. Currently, Iran fields an outdated mix of antiquated Russian and Iraqi, American, and Chinese-built aircraft. Many of these planes date from the Cold War. One particularly advanced variety of this Russian jet, for example, is armed with air-to-air, anti-ship, land attack missiles, and bombs, precision munitions that would significantly increase the performance capabilities of the Iranian Air Force. And they could target other fighter aircraft, stationary military facilities, and naval vessels. These fighter jets in the hands of Iran would fundamentally change the balance of power in the Middle East and pose a threat to U.S. facilities and our local allies. According to some reports, Iran, more concerning, is seeking not just to buy these aircraft, but also license their production in Iran, which would greatly strengthen Iran's industrial base and its technical knowledge. It would also leave the international community with even fewer options to prevent Iranian access to this technology in the future. At a recent Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing, Tom Shannon, the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, said the United States would block the approval of fighter aircraft sales from Russia to Iran. And I urge the Obama administration to use all diplomatic measures available to it to ensure we fulfill Undersecretary Shannon's commitment. As my colleagues know, Iran could use these weapons to threaten U.S. assets in the Persian Gulf region, challenge the safety of our vital ally Israel and other close partners, or to protect illicit nuclear sites within Iran's borders. These threats are not just hypothetical. Iran remains a rogue and unpredictable regime that supports terrorism in the region and is publicly committed to the destruction of Israel. Mr. President, the international community cannot stand by while Iran continues to threaten our allies and destabilize the Middle East. Its illegal ballistic missile tests in March served as yet another example that the Iranian regime is not a responsible member of the international community. These tests helped Iran to further develop missiles capable of reaching most of the Middle East and even parts of Europe, and they destabilize the region and belie Iran's supposedly peaceful intentions. Stated often by both its president and foreign minister, they claim Iran's intentions are to serve as a responsible member of the international community, but these provocative ballistic missile tests clearly contradict their commitments under UN Security Council Resolution 2231 and demand a response. Last week, I met with Vitaly Churkin, the Russian ambassador to the United Nations. While Ambassador Churkin reiterated Russia's commitment to the JCPOA and our shared goal of preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, I left our conversation convinced that Russia will continue to stand in the way of the international community's efforts to penalize Iran for its ballistic missile tests. Mr. President, Russia's military sales to Iran and intransigence at the UN Security Council are disappointing, to say the least, in light of Russia's agreement to the terms of this nuclear deal and the importance of all of us working together in the international community to constrain Iran's bad behavior. The challenge for American diplomacy is to convince Russia that its military sales to Iran, its refusal to engage in multilateral action to punish Iranian ballistic missile tests, and its hesitancy to sanction Iran for supporting terrorist groups harm not only American interests, but Russian interests as well. Enabling Iran to strengthen its military capabilities makes it easier for Iran in the future to one day return to an effort to develop a nuclear weapon. Ballistic missile tests foment instability in the whole Persian Gulf and southern Europe, both of which lie close to Russia. As we've tragically seen in recent weeks, the scourge of modern terrorism does not abide by international borders and poses a real threat to Russia as well. In the coming months and years, the United States must continue to pursue action at the Security Council and work with our European allies to punish Iran for its bad behavior. With that, I'd like to yield to my friend, the senior senator from Minnesota, who has just joined me here for this colloquy. Senator Klobuchar has joined me to talk about the importance of continuing to work to hold Iran accountable under the JCPOA, the urgent need to confirm senior national security nominees, and the imperative of supporting our regional partners, especially our vital ally, Israel. Senator Klobuchar.
Mr. President.
The senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, I want to thank Senator Coons for his work. And as he has stated, Russian actions are very harmful in the effort to bring peace in the Middle East. Russia reportedly plans to sell advanced aircraft and missile systems, as Senator Coons has noted, to Iran, and may begin making these shipments in the next few days. These weapons could be used to destabilize the region and threaten the security of our allies, especially Israel. Russia also continues to block the UN Security Council from taking action in response to Iran's recent illegal missile tests. These actions can only embolden Iran and encourage Iran to disregard its commitments. Russia, as a JCPOA country, a world power, a member of the UN Security Council, needs to be convinced that it is in its best interest, in the interest of the international community, that Iran sticks to its commitments under the JCPOA. I thank you, Senator Coons, for making those points. And as you noted, I also want to stress the need to enforce Iran's commitments under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, to confirm nominees for positions vital to national security and to support our allies in the Mideast. Preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon is one of the most important objectives of our national security policy. I've strongly advocated for and supported the economic sanctions that brought Iran to the negotiating table over the last few years. Those sanctions resulted in a nuclear non-proliferation agreement between Iran and the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, and China that was implemented in January. But our work is clearly not done. As we have seen over the past few months, Iran continues to conduct ballistic missile tests, continues to support terrorism, threatening regional stability. And now we are reading news reports, as I noted, that Russia is selling a long-range surface-to-air missile defense system to Iran. All of this means that we have to remain vigilant in our monitoring and in our verification. That's why I sponsored the Iran Policy Oversight Act and encourage my colleagues to pass it. The bill does three important things to hold Iran accountable. First, it allows Congress to more quickly impose economic sanctions against Iran's terrorist activities. Second, the bill also expands military aid to Israel. And third, the bill ensures that agencies charged with monitoring Iran have the resources that they need. We also have to reauthorize the Iran Sanctions Act in order to ensure that we can hold Iran accountable if it violates the deal. The Iran Sanctions Act is up for reauthorization this December and has been a pivotal component of U.S. sanctions against Iran's energy sector, and its applications have been steadily expanded to other Iranian industries. Given Iran's history, we can anticipate that it will continue to test the boundaries of international agreements, and we have to be ready to respond when it does so. In summary, we must hold Iran accountable every step of the way, imposing harsh sanctions, as the administration must do, against those responsible for Iran's ballistic missile program, which threatens regional and global security, is of course a good start. But we must continue to sanction Iran's ballistic missile program, as well as its sponsorship of terrorism and abuse of human rights. Mr. President, I see that we are gathered here for some very important votes, and I will put the rest of my statement on the record regarding support for our regional allies and the need to confirm key national security officials to important positions. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Mr. President, I'd like to thank Senators Klobuchar and Blumenthal for joining me in this colloquy.